Greetings, class. I'm going to take you through the prologue and kind of what you should do today and tomorrow. Like I said, if you get it all done today, Wednesday, great. But you do have until the end of the day, Thursday, to complete these tasks. First, we're going to work on the prologue and the stages of adolescence, and then we're going to connect it to the prologue. So the more that you're listening and paying attention to all my added notes and stuff as from the prologue is just going to make it easier for you to complete the assignment. First, I did not catch this before copying. I apologize, and I didn't want to recopy these packets again. So on page 5 for your formative, I heard it when you guys were talking, where it says teenage decision making, you are going to cross that out and replace it with risk taking and adolescence, just like the summative. Again, I apologize. I thought I already did that. So if you look online or if you look in Schoology, like the rubric will say risk-taking in adolescence. So some decisions are risk-taking, but just want to make sure that everything is aligned. So make sure you change that. All right, Shakespearean prologues. Shakespeare does this in the beginning of every single play. So some might say, why are you telling me like what's going on? Because usually it is written in a sonnet format with that A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F rhyme scheme with G, G being at the end. It's always an end rhyme scheme. And then we talked about the syllables in the beginning. So there's iambic pentameter, and then there's a certain number of syllables per line. And usually there's a situation that is in the first 12 lines, and then the last two are kind of like the resolution or the switch. There's a shift. It's designed to outline the plot. It tells you the setting, it sets the tone, and it's supposed to hook the audience. And it acts as a guide to like what the major conflicts are and the themes. So again, that brings into question, why would you tell me everything that's going to happen in the prologue? Why would I want to watch this play? That still comes into line of, why do you rewatch movies? Why are you watching K-pop Demon Hunters 5 times? Like there's something with you're still entertained. You still want to see how it plays out. And back in the day, this was their entertainment. The only thing that changed was the actors. So sometimes your entertainment was the actor who played Romeo last time, I didn't like, and I like this one. Like they have different body language. They have different styles of acting. They have different styles of speaking. They have tones are different. And if you remember, or in case this is new information for you, during Shakespeare's time, men played all the roles. Women were not allowed to be actors. It was not considered ladylike or appropriate for women to be actors. Apparently just men could do that. So you would have seen men playing all the parts. There's a lot to unpack in just the prologue. So we're going to break it down a little bit to kind of talk about the meaning and purpose and why Shakespeare writes this way. I have some shift notes there for you. Like, are we going to put this much of notes on there? Not necessarily. Am I going to cover all that information? Absolutely. Here's our first reading. This first time through, I just want you to try to figure out like what's going on, what's happening, what's the setting, where are we, who's involved, because that is why Shakespeare's doing this. So here we go. First reading of the prologue. 2 households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, from Ayton grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, who misadventured peace overthrows, doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage, the which if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. So again, you're sitting here like, okay, what's going on? Maybe you have some kind of vague idea of what's happening. So I'm going to take you through a couple of words and things just to make sure you have the ideas correct. First, we have 2 households, both alike in dignity, which really means we have 2 families alike in status. One major misconception with Romeo and Juliet is people think that they can't be together because they're of different classes. That's not true. They are equal in standing. If you look, and we're in Verona, so we're in Italy, and if you're like, well, what's going on then? If you look at line 3, from ancient grudge, break to new mutiny. So there's some ancient grievance or a feud between these two families. And for some reason, it's people are revolting again. Like something has brought it to the surface. So usually some disrespect somebody felt from one family to the next. Something has happened that brought everything back up again. So the key here, again, is the reason they're not together is because of the grudge. We have two families who don't get along, and we know that Romeo and Juliet are part of these two families. So we can make an inference that they can't be together because the families have issues. Has nothing to do with class. When it talks about civil blood makes civil hands unclean, civil is just kind of another way of saying like civilians. So like the other people in the town are being, or in Verona, are being brought to this. So that's bloody, hands unclean, meaning like people are fighting. There's a lot of bloodshed, death, maiming, all this kind of stuff. So even it's gotten to the point that even other people in the city are getting involved in this feud. Then we have from forth the fatal loins of these two foes. This is a cursed birth. So fatal, death, loins are reproductive. And so they're saying like the loins, so the children, the birth of these two foes, these two enemies. So we know that at birth, Romeo and Juliet are cursed from that moment as soon as they're born. And then the next line is a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. So we know that these two, who are part of feuding families, make a decision to take their own life. We don't know what led to it. We don't know how they did it. We just know they do. And Shakespeare never addresses what the feud is. So like, what is this grudge between these two major families? He never tells you, which drives some people nuts because we always like to know the why. Why don't they like each other? What happened? He doesn't address it. So that for you should be something as the audience member who's like, why wouldn't he tell me? What am I supposed to get out of that? That he's not going to say, oh, they feud because of A, B, and C. It's the fact that they have a grudge. And so what happens, maybe you could look at it with, well, what happens if I have a grudge with someone that I never deal with and I don't address, and if I doesn't come to conclusion, what's the ripple effect of that? Then, so again, we have these star-crossed lovers who take their life. So we know they make the decision to do that. So we have these two young people who this is their decision of like how I'm going to deal with whatever is in front of me. I'm going to take my own life as a means to deal with that. The next line is, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. What that means is the only way that this feud is going to end is with the death of the children. So nothing else. You can't explain it. You can't talk it through. You can't have somebody else intervene. Nothing. All it's going to take is the death of the two children. So you think about what Shakespeare's doing with that as well. What is he trying to tell us? So then you get the fearful passage of their death-marked love. So again, the tragic cursed love, again, repeats that idea of, and the continuance of their rage, nothing but the children's death could end. So the last two lines, so this is kind of telling you everything that's going on. And then the last few lines are like, well, now we're going to start the play. So if you didn't understand anything I just said, don't worry. You're going to watch the play and it'll fill in the gaps in case something was missed. All right, second reading. If you're like, Schiffler, please. Okay, so I'm going to read it one more time. I want you to circle any words that relate to love, and then I want you to box any words that have to do with tragedy. So anything that kind of makes you think of something that's tragic and anything that makes you think of something that deals with love. Two households, both alike in dignity, and fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage, the which if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. All right, let's see what you got. Play about love, right? Again, there's this major misconception, and I kind of talked about how people put Romeo and Juliet up as this kind of like epic love story. And it does make me throw up a little bit in my mouth because I feel like it's a real misinterpretation of what Shakespeare was doing, especially when he's putting it in his tragedies. If he really wanted to talk about young love, he would have put it in his comedies, right? So he's making a decision to tell this story in this way. So there's kind of two, and I only did fair because sometimes we talk about a fair maiden, so it could maybe roughly be related to love. But then we're going to think about tragedy, right? If you look at the boxes around your prologue, bam, few more that have to do with tragedy than love. So again, tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, but it's much quicker to just say Romeo and Juliet. So that's kind of where that happens. An alternate prologue. Tupac explains how he's inspired by Shakespeare in an interview with the LA Times. This was back in '95. That's some serious ghetto. Bleep. You got this guy, Romeo from the Bloods, who falls for Juliet, a female from the Crips, and everybody in both gangs are against them. So they have to sneak out, and they end up dead for nothing. Real tragic stuff. So if you think about some of those ideas, this idea of, like for some reason two people can't be together because there's feuding families. There is West Side Story has come from that, where you're looking at that's a race issue. And so that idea, again, of two lovers not being able to be together for some reason. So it could be class, could be race, could be gender. There could be like on acceptance somewhere. That is an idea that dates back to Shakespeare 400 years ago. And so that is a trope that continues that people still want to. How many times do we have, person meets person, something happens, person loses person gets person back. Like there's just kind of this, and then all the nuances of like, well, why were they apart in the first place? Was it a misunderstanding? Well, what was it? There's usually a misunderstanding in Shakespeare, and depending on if it's a tragedy or a comedy, right? That misunderstanding or a message doesn't get through, like there's something that happens that that causes the rest of the events, like usually happens around Act 3, and all the other events unfold, is because, Shakespeare's doing that intentionally, but usually if it's a tragedy, that misunderstanding results in people dying. In the comedies, that misunderstanding ends up being ha ha ha, but we got past it and now we're together forever because we got married. So depends on which version. So again, Romeo and Juliet are equals. Nothing to do with class. So tragedy, not a love story. So it's kind of like, these two people fall in love in this tragic story about their families. So it's about the grudge and the repercussions of that. And Shakespeare wants you to know what's coming, which is why he tells you everything in the prologue. All right, now what? In your assignment in Schoology, which is where you are already, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this video, the first box there is I want you to think about what I told you and what do you think Shakespeare is saying about risk-taking and adolescence in the prologue? Do your best. You're trying to make some inferences. You're trying to think, what is he trying to tell me about this without really knowing about any of the particulars? So you're just doing your best to be like, what could I figure out right now? Okay. Then, again, in case we didn't get this before, change it. So once you write that paragraph, then you're going to go to the Stages of Adolescence article. It's on page 11 in your packet. What the authors are really talking about, it's two medical professionals and who specialize in adolescence. And so they're really kind of looking at the emotional intensity, the risk-taking of adolescent development, and kind of they divide adolescence into 3 stages. And so you can kind of see in where Romeo and Juliet are going to kind of fit. And you can also maybe see some information about your own development at the same time, because this is your age. So what you're going to do is read the article. I want you to underline ideas that you connect with or find interesting. Put a plus next to ideas that you think connect with what you learned from the prologue. This will help you with your writing to already have some ideas there. Because then when you're going to go back to that Google assignment, because now you're on task 2, because these slides are linked there, is now how do this article and the prologue connect? What are they telling you, or Shakespeare telling you about adolescence in the prologue? And then now you're going to back it up with evidence from the Stages of Adolescence article. So if you put some pluses when you were reading, you might already have some. So you're going to put that paragraph on there. And I included the rubric on there just to remind you of what I'm looking for as far as grades go and connections. Again, do your best. You don't have a lot of information. I take that to heart. But I really want you thinking about, with this information I have, what do I think Shakespeare's trying to tell me about risk-taking in adolescence, now that I have some evidence there. All right. If you have any questions, something isn't making sense, all you have to do, send me an email. I'm in professional development, but I will have my computer. So if you have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you on Friday.